Okay, so welcome to this month's webinar. This month we will be looking at the admin console, how to manage the resources in there, users, the various types of limiting that you can do in terms of limiting users and limiting machines. Before we start, for anybody who hasn't attended the session before, the flow of the session is I will do a quick PowerPoint presentation, normally no longer than 5 minutes or so. We'll then do a walkthrough of what we've looked at in the PowerPoint, and then I will leave open the remaining time to any question and answers related to today's topic. If I can't answer any of the questions that are presented today, I will follow up with you offline. So to get started, just a quick introduction. My own name is Niall Fahy. I am the education coordinator here for Mozy by EMC. I look after all the internal and external trainings. So I look after everything from designing, planning, and delivering training content to both our internal support staff and any external people. So just a quick overview of what we're going to cover today. As I might have mentioned a few minutes ago, we're going to look at how we manage our users, how you manage devices inside the admin console, how you go about managing resources and the user groups. Okay, if you are using user groups, we will look at that as well. But more specifically, we'll be just looking at how you're going to go about managing your devices and your users, because those are the ones that are kind of using up your time in terms of making sure people have the right amount of devices assigned to them, people have the right amount of resources assigned to them, and so forth. So just some definitions. So from the point of view of the admin console, when I talk about an administrator, obviously it's somebody who is charged with looking after the account. They may as well be a user, but their primary function within the Mozy environment is that they're set up to look after everybody else. They're looking after adding users, adding devices. If people need more resources, they're looking after that, and that kind of administrative side of things. From a user's point of view, then, if this is anybody or any customer or colleague that may be using the software that you are supplying to them. So anybody who actually has the client installed on their machine and is running a backup. Resources then are the actual storage that we use. So some people may say storage, but we would use the term resources. So things like, because we can also, when we talk about resources, talk about the users, the amount of users or devices that we assign to somebody. But primarily, when we talk about resources, we're looking at the actual storage that the person is using. We have two user types within the admin console. For anybody who's not familiar with it, there is a desktop user and a server user. So there are differences to it. So a desktop user can back up any desktop operating system, but it cannot back up a server operating system. A server user can back up any type of operating system. So it can back up a server operating system, and it can back up a desktop operating system. If you were to try and install if you try to register an account for a user that's a desktop user on a server operating system, you will get a rejection. So we give you an error message to tell you that it's not able to install that account on the server. So in terms of users and devices, so devices are the computers that we're backing up. Okay, some people may refer to them as computers, some people refer to them as devices. We'll use the term devices. So these are the users these are the machines that you back up. A user can have multiple devices on their account, up to a maximum of 20. So one email address can actually have up to 20 devices on there. A user, however, can only be desktop or server. So if you intend to back up server operating systems and desktop operating systems, you're better off creating your user as a server user, because that way you can back up both server and desktop operating systems. If you create your account as a desktop user and further down the line you need to back up a server operating system, you will need to create an additional account, user account, to back up that server operating system. In terms of resources, storage quota, as you'll be aware of, is shared. So because of that, everybody has access to the amount of storage that's available to the account. To protect against individual users using too much storage against other people, you can limit a user or a device. We'll look at that in the walkthrough in a moment about how you would actually go ahead and do that. We'll also be looking at updating your plan, how you do that, how you can check your billing, your invoices, and so forth. If your account has user groups, these user groups allow you to split up the organization into business units. So the advantage of a user group is if you're in a large organization, or you have a large customer base and you have customers in a particular location, or you have people inside in a particular part of the organization, for example, marketing, sales, I suppose support, then you can okay. Apologies there if the slides weren't updating. I'll be sharing them anyway at the end of the presentation. Thanks for that, Nina. Apologies. Okay, so just to go back there. So just in terms of user groups, you can set them up inside the organization if you so choose. They're intended for larger, I suppose, organizations where you would have large scale groups inside the business, and you would need maybe a sub administrator to look after particular units within the organization. Or if you had a particularly large customer base and you wanted to divide that up, you could use user groups also for that. Resources in a user group can be set to shared, limited, or assigned. With that, I suppose for user groups, the resources, when we say shared, limited, or assigned, what we mean is what way the user group will actually approach using the storage on the account. If it's a shared user, or if it's a shared user group, it acts the same way as a user does, in that it can access all the storage that's available on the account. So if there's 90 gigabytes available on the account, it's able to use 90 gigabytes. If you limit the user group to 40 or 50 gigabytes, then the user group pulls from the shared amount of storage, so the 90 gigabytes that's available on the account. But in itself, it has a limit. If it goes over, or if it reaches 50 gigabytes, it will no longer pull storage from the shared pool of storage. What that looks like is if I have the storage available that's there, it'll still pull it. If I don't have the storage, then that limit doesn't apply. So even if I was at 30 gigabytes on my limited group and there was no free storage available to the organization, then obviously I can't pull any more storage because the shared pool is empty. The assigned group is slightly different. It's similar to limited in the sense that it has only a maximum amount of storage, but the assigned user group actually takes the storage out of the shared pool and keeps it to itself. So if you decide to assign 30 gigabytes to that user group, then it's always going to have just 30 gigabytes unless you update that. That 30 gigabytes then is taken out of the shared pool and is no longer available to the rest of the organization. Okay, so I'm just going to jump out here now and open up the admin console to show you my account and walk through some of the stuff we looked at there. Again, apologies that the slide deck wasn't updating there. I will get that sent on to you all. Okay, for some reason my account doesn't want to work. So I'm just going to open up the admin console here. This is my support account, so I'll just need to open up one of my business accounts. So I will do that. Okay, so can everybody see the admin console on the screen? Just want to make sure that we don't have the same issue. Perfect, thank you. Okay, so inside your admin console, you probably have a similar view as I have here. If you're logged in now, you'll see here the dashboard first. So this dashboard tracks all the users under your account. So you have a bar chart here in terms of the backups made in the last week, but also here you have a pie chart breaking down the backup success. So you'll see here, backed up within the last 24 hours, backed up within the last week, backup over 1 week old, and then never backed up. And if you're interested to see, okay, which machines have never backed up, or which ones haven't backed up over in a week, you can check that. You can actually click on any of these, and there are hyperlinks, and they'll open up the machines here in the machine section, and it'll give you a listing here of all the machines that haven't backed up. Okay, so of all the machines on the account that you're administrating, that if there's any of them that haven't been backed up, then you can see them here and check if there is any issue. However, if you are using sync, bear in mind that never shows as backed up because it's in a continuous synchronization. Okay, so what we're going to look at here is the quick link section first. So the resource summary will give us the information about the account. Okay, so it'll tell us here the available storage and how much storage is actually used. Okay, so as I mentioned, if you're using user groups, you will have this limited, shared, and assigned scenario. So shared obviously is the entire storage pool. Okay, and at the moment, if I was in this default user group, then I could pull from the remaining 8.4 gigabytes that's available. Okay, as long as I don't exceed, as long as the user group itself is not exceeding 10 gigabytes. At the moment, there's no fear of that because it's only 820 megs. But if the user group was at its maximum, then I wouldn't be able to take any more storage from here. If I'm in a shared user group, I can pull from the remaining 8.4 gigabytes without any limitation. An assigned user group, however, actually takes the storage out of the group. So if I actually edit this one here, So I'll edit this and change this assigned to 35 and hit save. If we scroll back up, you'll notice now that there's actually 13.4 gigabytes available. Okay, because I removed 5 gigabytes from that assigned storage group, it's now back into the shared pool where everybody can use it. Okay. So if I'm in a shared storage scenario and I have certain users that are pulling more storage than I want them to do, how can I deal with that? Okay, well, first of all, come in and search list users. Okay, you search for the user that you want. In this scenario, luckily enough, I'm here, so I can pull this one out. Okay, I'll open up the user here, and I'm able to see the information on the user. Okay, so I can see the information for the user here, and I can see as well the storage scenario for the user, and then their machines that they're backing up, or devices that they're backing up. And as well, if they've Mozy Sync, then I can see that container there here as well. Okay, so if I look at it here, I can see that I'm using 25.7 gigabytes of storage across my 3 devices here. Okay, and there's 9.3 gigabytes available to me because this user group that I'm part of has an assigned storage to it. If I'm in the shared pool, this is actually just going to tell me what's remaining on the account that's available. Here I can see how many devices I have available to myself. I'm using 2 currently, but I have 8 available. If I want to change that, I hit edit, and I can actually select how many devices I want to give to myself or to the user. If the user needs to add an additional device or additional devices, then you can adjust that there. As I said a while ago, there's a maximum of 20 devices you can give to a user. Once you're happy, you hit submit, and it will save. And then the user, what that allows then is when the user goes to install the software on a new machine, they'll enter their username and password. And in the next screen, the software client that's being installed will ask them a question whether they want to replace the existing machine with the current one or add a new machine. If they want to add a new machine, which is the reason you'll be upping the amount of devices they have, they just select add new machine and the device gets added to their account and will appear in here underneath this table here. If they replace an older machine, they'll be given a drop down if they have multiple devices already, and they can select which device they want to replace. So that's my storage and devices. Then I can look at setting a limit. So I see a particular user is quite heavy on their usage, and I don't want that to be happening. Say, for example, your organization decide that we want users to back up, but we don't want them to go overboard in what they're backing up. So we're going to assign 25 gigabytes to each person. In that scenario, if somebody was going over 25 gigabytes quite heavily, if somebody like me here is on 25.7, we may leave it go. But if you see somebody that's on like 50 gigabytes or something like that, you may want to step in. So what you can do there is actually set a storage limit for the user. That way you can actually limit the amount of storage the user can use. And what will happen from the user's point of view then is that they'll run a backup and they'll get an account error 3 message. That message will tell them they either need to increase their storage or reassess their file selection. Most often than not, for most office environments, we calculate it as the average office user will use in the region of 25 gigabytes. I mean, for myself there, my machine is 18.5 gigabytes. That is absolutely everything on my machine that I use for my day-to-day job. And I would have, compared to maybe other people in the office, I'd have a lot more PowerPoint presentations and presentations, information, I suppose, and PDFs and stuff like that, that probably increases my size more so than others. So as you can see, kind of anybody that's using over 25 gigabytes in an office environment would be considered quite a heavy user, depending on their position. Obviously, if it's somebody that's working with media files on a daily basis, then their backup size is going to be quite different to somebody who is just constantly working off of an Excel sheet or something like that. So you can limit the user's storage there, input the amount that you want, and just hit save. Okay. If it's not a user issue and it's just a particular machine, like in this scenario here, I have 18.5 gigs, then you can actually go in and set a device limit as well. Okay. So you can limit a device if you so wish, rather than limiting the user. The advantage if you limit the user is that if the user has multiple devices, then it sets a cap for all their devices. But if you wish, you can go down to the machine level and also set a limit there for any particular machine that you see as quite heavy on its usage. So from there, also if you click on a device, it will open up information on the machine. You can also check the health of the user machine from here. If it's the scenario that we saw a while ago, where in the dashboard, so when we saw from the dashboard and we saw those reports, you could click on one of those machines, and from there you can actually see the backup history of the user's machine to see what's actually happening. Okay, so sometimes you may see, oh, the user hasn't backed up in over a week. Now, that could be a point of interest, but it also could be a scenario where the person is on vacation. So you can actually tell that by coming into the backup history here and actually checking when their last backup was. Okay, if their last backup hasn't occurred, if the backup hasn't occurred in a couple of days and there's no sign of any backups running with any errors or something like that, then it may just be that the person hasn't run a backup. Okay, so we can check that from the admin console. You can check the user's backup history. Okay, you can see when they ran a backup. If there is an error, it will report in here where the result says. Okay, so we'll actually give you the error code that you can actually check against the knowledge base to see which error code and the information behind that error code and how to troubleshoot. Okay. You can also from here view any restores the end user has made. And when I say you can see the restore, you can see the restore ID and when it was requested and when it was finished. You can't actually see the files that were restored. You just see the information relating to it, what type of restore it was, the size of it, and when it was requested and when it finished. Okay, and that's just in order to keep a track of everything and a record of the restores created for the user. So if we go back to the dashboard, just click on dashboard here, will bring us back to the home page. So again, we'll see the dashboard here again. The other ones to look at from here, okay, is the ability to add a new user. Okay, from here, if you have user groups, you'd select the user groups. If you don't, then it is automatically going to add the user to your default user group. Once you select, if you have to select it, you select it. If you don't, you can move to the second step, which is define the profile. So from here, you decide if the user is going to be a server user or a desktop user. As I mentioned, if it's going to be a server, if you're going to be backing up servers further down the road, you're better off setting yourself up as a server user. If it's just a desktop that the user is always going to be backing up, then set them up as a desktop user. When setting the user up, you can actually set a storage limit for the user from here. So rather than going back to it later, if you want to from the outset, you can limit somebody from here. You can select how many devices you want to give to the user, and if you want to enable sync for them. All you then need to do is enter the username, their email address, and you can add multiples if you want. So if you add multiple users here, whatever profile definition that you put into this section here will apply to all. And then once you hit add users, as long as this option here is selected, it will then send an email to the user, welcoming them to the service and getting them to begin the process of downloading the software and creating their account. And when they create their account, what I mean there is that it gets them to create their password. Okay, in terms of the change plan section, that's here in the quick links as well. Also, if you need to add additional storage or remove storage that you're not using, then you can do that through the change plan section. You can make changes to the plan that you're using, and once you've made changes, you see here, I go downgrade. The submit button only becomes clickable once you have actually made a selection. Okay. Underneath that, you'll see your billing information, your billing history, and your payment info. Okay. So your billing information will give you a breakdown of the account status. So what's the account status? When's your next renewal? And then it will give you the information on the plan here. Okay. Below that, the billing history will actually give you the invoices. So it'll give you a history of your invoices for your plan, and all these invoices will remain in here. You can access them at any time. You just click on the hyperlink here, and it will open up the invoice, and it'll give you a breakdown of the invoice here. Okay. So those are always stored within the admin console underneath the billing history. And from here as well, you can change the payment information. Okay. Finally, just before we finish, if we go to account details, we click on account details, or you can click on the user up here. It will give you the account information or the account details for the administrator here. If you need to change the admin name, the admin email address, or update the password, then you can do it from here. You can also identify if you want to receive the newsletter or if you want to receive email notifications. The email notifications will be related to error messages potentially, or they will also give you notification for your invoice. So if there's a new charge made to the account, then it will send you an email with the invoice. If you don't want to receive those emails, then you can switch it to no. It doesn't mean that the invoices won't be created. It's just that they won't be emailed to you anytime there's a change or a charge on the account. Instead, they'll remain within the admin console for you. So that brings us to the end of the presentation and the walkthrough. I'll leave the remaining time open to any questions you may have in relation to the presentation today. Thank you for taking the time to join. If you don't have any questions, and we will be running a webinar again next month. As I mentioned, we have recorded today's session, so I will make that available. I will send that on to people once I have it edited and hosted on our support.mozy.com website. Once it's up there, we'll make that available to you. And in that email, when I send the recording link, I will also send you on the slide deck from today. Okay, so there doesn't seem to be any questions on today's topic. So I will leave it there. We'll wrap up the session. If you do think of any questions afterwards, feel free to reach out to me. You should have my email address from the invitation. If not, it is just niallf@mozy.com. Okay, so that's just niallf@mozy.com. Thank you for taking the time to join us today, and we look forward to having you again at our webinar next month. Have a good day.